Hi everyone, welcome back to 33 Founders. Chase and I are so excited to be joined with Paul and Simon from MAZ Digital today. Thanks so much for joining us, guys.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
So first off, how have you guys been?
Busy.
Seems
Very
like
busy.
it.
Definitely. When did we last chat?
About a year ago today.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. Yeah, so really busy.
You guys look much taller. So making a web browser is sort of an insane thing to do. You've got Apple, Google, Mozilla, MAZ. But despite what people saying that it would be impossible, you recently presented Stream to the world. So can you give us the story behind that and why you stayed true to this new vision?
Yeah, I mean, you are absolutely right that it's sort of insane to build a web browser. We are not denying that fact. We're just also insane. To us, it wasn't so much about can we build a better web browser, even though that became part of the mission, but it was really, how can we make sharing better? And if you remember from a year ago, we had this feature inside our publishing platform that we called clippings. And the idea was that you could cut out little areas of content and share them. And, at some point we realized hey, wait a minute. What if you could do that on the entire internet? Separately, I actually had pitched Simon and Shika on the idea of building a web browser maybe a year previous to that, because I was just generally very unhappy with the way that web browsing worked on mobile and tablet devices. I felt like you had a desktop browser that just happened to be really small, like a baby desktop. Whereas most other apps are clearly optimized for a mobile experience. And I felt like web browsing still just looked exactly like web browsers on the desktop. And so as we started to think about sharing and thinking about better browsing experience, at some point we came together and thought well, maybe we should build this. There's actually a real need here for something better. And we didn't know at the time why most people don't build web browsers, it's really hard,
I think what's great about it too, Paul, is that it can really be used in so many different ways. So for me, my favorite part is that when I'm sharing something, it's done beautifully. It's not, the email from whatever magazine I'm reading, so-and-so shared this article. Instead, it's that awesome little picture that I can send via text, which is so much easier, to my mom or my friend who I want to share in that article. You found that people are using it differently. What are you learning about how people interact with their mobile browsers?
Well, I think that one of the most interesting things is that if you make something easier, people are more likely to do it. And that might seem intuitive, and I guess it is, but we're finding that it's true. And so, we get a lot of end user feedback, emails, whatever, from people that say things like, normally I don't really share that much, but I'm finding myself sharing more and sharing more often and really sort of getting into it because of your browser, and so it's not just appealing to the people that already share and making their lives a little easier, but it's bringing new people into the fold. And of course, sharing doesn't necessarily mean sharing to Facebook or Twitter or something. Like the example you just gave, messaging your family with a cool clip from Stream. I think a lot of people sort of forgot that counts too. You don't have to be posting on Twitter and seem really smart to share an article. We actually find that the vast majority of people are using email and messages to share way more than any sort of social media or public-facing network.
And that's really important too. We were just talking to Paul Berry from Rebel Mouse, and he was emphasizing the importance of, with content, you want someone to share your content. That's showing that they really care about what you've done versus just, retweeting it because they don't know if someone's going to read it. So when you have people doing that, you're also really helping brands. And so you have Stream SDK that people can integrate into their apps. And congratulations for it already being integrated in over 1,000 apps. What's it like when you release your product for other developers to use?
Simon, you're a developer.
Sure. I'll speak a little bit about it. So it's a completely separate set of problems, and the approach is very different. So when you're building something internally, especially in like startup mode, it's how can we be scrappy? How can we use limited amount of resources? How can we get this quick and efficient and out to market as soon as possible for feedback from end users? And when you're building something that you're going to ask other developers to put into their app, you have to think about trust. You have to think about how often they're going to be updating it, because it's not just a push that you're sending to a phone. Anytime you have bug fixes, they have to implement it into their app and then release a new version of their app. And so there's this whole like scaffolding of decisions and things you need to consider before you're really willing to release it to the world. And also, it takes a lot longer. It's kind of like, if you're making your bed for yourself or you're making your bed because you have guests coming over, you have to think about it from someone else's perspective. When I'm implementing it, something I have already built and I already know how it works, I don't need any documentation. I don't need to explain any edge cases. I don't need to think about any scenarios other than the scenarios that we're using it in. But the intention with Stream SDK is that if you're building a game, if you're building a photo app, if you're building a weather app, if you're building, a social media app, if you're building any kind of app, it's got relevance. People are generally wanting to share and don't have a good means of sharing from any native experiences so far. So how do we build a product that fits into as many of those categories, as many of those parallels as possible? And then how do we make it accessible to developers to download and try it out and win their trust without them having to spend a week, 2 weeks trying it out before they decide, oh, this is good for me or this isn't. So time to implement, information about implementing, and then, reliability and this is solid. I don't have any bugs in experiencing this. I didn't have any problems installing this in 5 minutes. So I can trust that, once you encounter one bump or two bumps in the road, no one's going to have the faith in it. So it took us a while. It took us a lot longer. We've been using, for our own purposes, the SDK in several versions and refining it, and then slowly working with some developers to implement it and figure out what obstacles they encounter before we were really willing to release it to the general public. But now it's there and available for anyone to put in their app. So if you want better sharing, go download the Stream SDK and try it out.
So now, future-proof is a pretty bold term to abide by, but it's posted in giant text right on your homepage. And you guys do it, and it's represented in everything that you do. I mean, you guys just touched on it. And that's a lot of pressure. So how do you stay on top of relevancy, and how soon is too soon to update?
Well, one of the first investments we made when we started the company was a time machine. And so we went into the future, and it's very, very hard to be future-proof because, well, the reasons are obvious because you don't actually know what's going to happen, right? So you can make a lot of educated guesses. For us, it's really about, and this is something we learned on really early, which is that if you have a customer, and it doesn't matter if it's a business customer like a publisher or developer, or a consumer like just a random end user that's using StreamWeb or something, like the idea is that it's our responsibility to think about their needs in real time. So it's not just giving them something they need today and then tomorrow comes and we're staying here. You have to stay in pace with your customer. And so, and if possible, a step ahead, but at the very least, sort of in pace with. And so for us, that really just means staying, really aware of sort of the market and trying to anticipate trends. There's a siren outside. I don't know if you guys can hear that.
Yeah, it's because you guys stole all the future technology.
But it's great to be able to say to a developer, like, this is just one thing that you don't need to worry about anymore because we're worrying about it. And so we have a lot to worry about, but you have one less thing to worry about. And I really think that is the key to any great product. Again, whether it's a consumer or a business, it's if you can make their life easier, even at the expense of your life becoming harder, like that's okay. That's why they're your customer, and I am someone else's customer who's making my life easier, I just sort of pass it on.
Looking towards the future, Paul, touching on it in a bit of a different note, you've mentioned that as CEO, the only way to live in the present is to live in the future. How are you applying that mentality to your leadership skills at MAZ, especially with, like you said, having 40 people on the team now?
I think we lost Chase. It's true, right? Like, I feel like there's different tiers of future thinking. For instance, thinking again of the customer lives in the present. And then our company as a whole and the whole team needs to be living a bit in the future. As the version of Stream that you're using today, we're working on a newer version of it.
Yeah.
But you don't know about that because you're the customer, right?
Yeah, you're supposed to worry about that, Paul, not me.
Right. Well, and then even within our organization, I do believe it's the role of the founders and ultimately the CEO to be even a step ahead of the team. So if you have like the customer is sort of like in the present and the general company is a little bit ahead of that, and then the CEO is sort of at the head of the pack within the team, and again, all of those things introduce complexity because even just like Simon's in a different time zone right now, that makes our communication a little more complex. That's sort of a very basic example, but if I'm working on plans that actually won't be executed for another 6 months and won't be publicly available for another 9 to 12 months, then me, my team, and our customer are all living like in different times, and in a way, it actually is a really good analogy because it is hard to communicate and manage expectations and get everyone on the same page when you're really thinking about very different times. And in startup life, like every week matters, and so 6, 9, 12 months can seem like an eternity, although it's interesting we're talking this week because tomorrow actually marks the 4th anniversary of MAZ.
That's great. Congratulations. It's been a pretty special 4 years.
Yeah.
So as you talk about your team and that expansion, how are you finding talent to keep you on top of your game, but also positioning what it's like to work at a startup to people who may not be familiar with it?
It's a good question. Working at a startup is very different, I think, than people that don't work at startups think it is. I think, the grass is always greener, I guess. But working at a startup is hard. It's really hard. And it takes a certain type of personality to really embrace that culture and embrace that level of responsibility, because I think you can work at a big company where you're just doing sort of one task in sort of an assembly line of many tasks, and then you come to a startup environment and all of a sudden you're doing 10 things, instead of one thing, or 100 things, I don't know. And so identifying people is difficult, and some companies, I think, specifically look for people that have worked at startups before. So it's like, oh, the drill. But even within the startup world, of course, every single startup is totally unique and different. And so I don't necessarily think that's a good indicator. To me, it's really just about trying to get to know someone during the application process and the interview process. And I care a lot less about what you've done, and I care a lot more about what I believe you are capable of doing, But that's hard to read, like, in a couple of interviews and an email, Simon, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think you touched on it, but there's just like a misnomer. Like, no one wants to sit there and beat their chest and be like, what I do is really hard. Because like that just sounds ridiculous and whiny. And by the same token, a lot of startup, entrepreneurs and early employees are very good at marketing because they have to think about marketing everything they do. So the world knows about all the cool parts of their job and all the fun things that they do, because we're all engaged in social media and promoting our own apps or whatever it is we're doing. But I think Paul touched on, there's a lot of responsibilities that fall onto a very few amount of people, especially, in the first few years when you're starting. And I don't really see an end to that anytime soon, even though we're still, we're growing and we're of significant size. And so really it's just about taking on people who are, even if they've never had the full weight of many multiple responsibilities and sole responsibilities of tasks and roles, someone who's excited about that. Someone who looks at all of that and instead of start stressing out about it or wanting to run into a hole or retreat behind their desk, someone who says, this is great, give me more. And even if they're willing to take on more than they can handle, it's a sign of like that willingness and that potential. And so even if they fail at some of the aspects and you have to dial it back, it's the right type of attitude. And I think those are the types of people in generally that we look for when we're hiring, can do, will try, there's never enough. And you have varying success because it's impossible to know the future without the time machine. And we only use it for product decisions, not for hiring.
Not for hiring.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was one of those we don't do evil things. So, yeah.
Well, Simon, though, I really like how you put it because it's all coming back. Everyone's talking about company culture today. And like you said, Paul, working at a startup, sometimes it seems like, I'm sure you guys know everyone down at Fueled in New York, that they're having fun. It's Fueled Collective and there's ice cream and popcorn, but it's not always like that. Right. And Simon, you touched on that ownership mentality, and when that really permeates a culture, then everyone's doing each job because everybody has a stake in the company and everybody wants it to succeed. As the company grows, especially so much since we last spoke only a year ago, how are you maintaining that mentality and keeping everyone on track?
That's a good question. It's a really good question.
No pressure.
Yeah, so part of it is that a lot of the people who've been here a long time are pretty self-sufficient in a lot of ways. No one really starts self-sufficient because there's a huge learning curve, and a lot of our early employees just got thrown into a mix where we said, no one's doing this job. Someone's been half-assing a very small percentage of it. Go, run with it, do it well, and if you do it well enough, we'll notice, and if not, we'll notice. And they've really grown into a lot more responsibilities than were ever set forth for them on, whatever our job listing said. It's always funny when we go to craft our job listing because no one wants to see a list of 60 things that they're going to be doing because then no one's going to apply for it. But the truth is, if we really listed out what most of our employees are doing, it's infinitesimally longer than
we always just add a bullet point at the bottom, like
more. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that's our way of just underselling how much responsibility they'll have. And of course, it varies in degrees depending on who they are, how much experience they are, and stuff. I think it's a task just to keep ourselves, as Paul mentioned before, on focused and on task, especially as the company's grown and the amount of products and services that we've built grown. It's very easy to get excited about the new one. It's really easy to get excited about what we're working on right now, but our employees sometimes don't even know that they're keeping their eyes on something that's 9 months down the road because we've already started talking about it at an executive level, already started making decisions about where the product's going. And even though they're getting feedback from end users today about something, or our publishers or developers today about something, we don't want to spend the time and energy because it doesn't align with that greater company vision in a longer period of time. And so we find ourselves every maybe 5, 6, 7 months kind of having these talks with the teams in the various offices about, refocusing. What have we been spending too much time on that we shouldn't? Where are we going to be spending our time in the future, and why? To help keep everyone in line about expectations and where they should be putting their energy. If I give you more than you can possibly do in a week, you have to make decisions about which of those things you're actually going to get done and which of those things you're going to table. And if you don't know what is for the greater good and what is in line with the company's goals, then you're definitely not going to make the right decision. You're going to guess and you're going to be working hard, but people working hard in the wrong direction. It doesn't do as much as people working hard in the right direction. So, Paul can speak probably a little bit more to it since he's on the ground with a lot of our team in New York, and spends a lot of his time making sure that all those future, current, and super future tenses kind of overlap and coagulate into a cohesive goal and vision for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add. I think what you said is right. Like, everyone's hardworking, but you want to make sure that they're working towards something unified, And I think the trickiest parts about founding a company or leading a company is that you don't always know exactly. Mm-hmm. And if you're if you're too fixed on one thing and too sort of unflexible, then you might miss out on opportunities. Like, for instance, we built this web browser, right? But if we had been like totally focused on the publishing platform exclusively, then we never would have let that idea rise to the top, And so that sort of came out of maybe a period of ambiguity. And then we identified some new areas that were worth focusing on, and then we refocused on something else. And then, so it sort of goes in these like waves of like laser focus, then ambiguity, then you identify new things to focus on, focus again. And it's tricky because, it's sometimes can almost seem a little unsure. I saw a great quote this morning on Twitter. I'm going to paraphrase, but it was like, when you are unsure, then anything is possible.
Sometimes that can be the best medicine.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're sure about everything, then it leaves no room for new ideas, So I think that's interesting. The only other thing I wanted to add to what Simon said about culture and what I like to think we've done here is created a culture where the culture is about working hard and doing good work, and less about ice cream, ponies, and we love ice cream as much as the next company. But like, I think some companies that's what they identify their culture with, and we identify our culture with being proud of our work, and then we also have fun, and so. I don't know, you'll see a startup job posting that's like marketing ninja, or whatever. But like, we have titles on our team like computer scientist 2, and I think that just speaks to sort of we take our work really, really seriously, and we like to have fun, as opposed to, taking fun really seriously, and then sometimes we work. And that's not for everyone. Like, the ice cream people might be onto something, but I don't have, viable businesses down the road.
I think you put it so well, Paul, and it really transitions me to, so we take a year off and I come back and you have a web browser. So now you guys have MAZ, you have Stream. Where are you going next? What's the next thing we can look forward to?
Oh, man. Well, I'll put it this way. If we talk in a year, and I hope we talk before that, a lot will look different than it does now. Even over the coming weeks, a lot's going to look different. iOS 8 is coming out, which presents some interesting opportunities for us that we didn't have before. We have new updates coming across all of the software that we make, and we even have some new products in the pipeline, very, very short term.
I'm very excited.
That will be coming out. You'll be one of the first to know, I promise.
Awesome. Can you tell us how people can, whether you're a user, so how can people download Stream, and then how can app developers get in touch with? There's a lot of ways to get in touch with you. Can you share that with us? Yeah, for sure. Hey, look, I can even write on our fancy new whiteboard. That's perfect.
But the app's called Stream Web. And Stream by my handwriting is really pretty bad. Oh, it's let's make it bigger. Is that better?
That's perfect.
So the site is streamapp.com. streamweb.co. And from there, you can download our web browser, which is called StreamWeb. There's also a link there for developers, which will take you to Stream SDK, and any other information you need, as well as info to contact us if you have any questions or feedback. One of the coolest things about covering the website, one of the coolest things about putting out StreamWeb is that for a long time we had a publishing platform where our customers were publishers, but we didn't have that much direct connection to the people that ended up using those apps. And now that we have an app that is ours, it's amazing to hear directly from the people that use the apps. And we love getting feedback, we love getting suggestions, and it's just so valuable. Like, we spend so much time guessing at how people use this stuff, and it's just so much when someone just tells you, and so anyway, try it out. It's totally free, and we'd love to hear any feedback or suggestions for sure.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having us again.
Yeah, it was great.